I don't know how much time had passed. I felt a hand on my shoulder.
雪村君、大丈夫かい？ずいぶん落ち込んだ顔をしているようだが。
Oh, in a way.
出て行ったみんなのことが心配なんだね。
I know they're soldiers. They've been in danger before, but this is different. There's all those guns out there, and a cannon. I'm scared some of them might not come back.
大丈夫だ。ちゃんと戻ってくるとも。
You really think so?
決まっているだろう。武士というのは何があっても決して約束を違えたりしないものだよ。あの状況で決死隊に志願した長倉君や島田君、そして斎藤君は今の世には珍しい本物の武士だ。武士というのは、男というのは決して女の子を悲しませたりはしないものだよ。だから大丈夫だ。
His words helped to calm my doubts. It was natural for me to worry, but I had forgotten they were all talented, intelligent men, capable of forging their own destinies, not frightened boys sent off to war and subjects to the whims of fate. Courage in the faces of death was a true samurai's greatest asset, and they had courage aplenty. You're right. I believe in them. They'll come back safely. The words were only just out of my mouth when Yamazaki ran into the magistrate's office, his face drawn.
山崎君、どうしたんだね。
井上さん、敵陣営付近の兵は銃で武装しているためとても近寄れません。こちらが間合いに近づく前に撃たれてしまい、どうにもなりませんでした。
そうか、これはいかんね。敵の主力は鉄砲か。ならば日が沈んだ後なら狙いを定めにくくなるな。
After the sun sets? Do you mean... He nodded solemnly.
羅刹隊を派遣するしかないだろう。
そうですね。それしかないでしょう。
三男さんと東堂君に伝えてこなくては。山崎君、一緒に来てくれ。
わかりました。
Sometime later, the Fury Corps moved out under Sun and Sun's command. They did have strength far beyond any humans. Perhaps they would be able to turn the tables. So, why don't I feel relieved? Something still felt wrong. This battle was unlike anything I'd experienced before, and my mind was still racing to catch up. I felt as if I was missing something important, but... what? A gunshot sounded from the entrance. Our men would have had no reason to fire, which means it had to be...
おい、新選組の主力は奉行所から出払ってるみたいだぜ。今のうちに崩せ。
Only moments after the soldier's voice reached me, Yamazaki ran into the room, his eyes wide.
井上さん、このままでは奉行所は落ちます。せめて一体だけでも呼び戻さなくては。
しかし誰が伝令に行くと言うんだい。ここを開けてしまうのはまずかろう。
俺が伝令に向かいます。ですから。
Inoue shook his head.
山崎君を行かせるわけにはいかんよ。情けない話だが、私一人ではこの奉行所を守りきるのは無理だ。
それは。
Yamazaki frowned and began pacing back and forth. Once again, the deafening thunder of the cannon shook the magistrate's office. If the bombardment continued, we were surely done for. I'll do it! I'll deliver the message!
しかし君では。
I know I'm no good in a fight. I mean, I can barely protect myself, and it'd be difficult for me to take down a warrior from the Satsuma or Choshu, but I think I could probably make it to Goku no Miya Temple without being discovered. And I was a demon after all. If I was wounded, it would heal quickly. In fact, I could probably take 1 or 2 bullets and not die. If one of you leaves, then we won't have any hope of mounting a defense when the Satsuma attack. But if I go, you'll still be at full strength. I wouldn't be fighting anyway, even if I did stay here.
確かにな。今ここを離れることのできる人間は君しかいないだろう。
Inoue seemed torn, but it took him only moments to make up his mind. He wasn't happy about it, but we all knew there was no time to waste.
わかった。それでは君に行ってもらうことにしよう。だが君が行くのであれば、敵本陣の五光宮神社は危険だ。斎藤君のいる龍雲寺の方に行ってもらおう。彼にここの現状を伝え、すぐ戻るように言ってほしい。
Yes, sir.
俺たちが薩摩勢の目を引きつけておく。その間に裏から出るんだ。
Right. Thank you.
ここを落とせば新選組は終わりだ。行け！
ここから先には一歩も入れんぞ。
当たらない鉄砲などただのおもちゃに過ぎん。かかってこい。
I said a silent prayer of thanks and protection for Inoue and Yamazaki and ran for the back door. I ran through the darkened forest, the stars in a little light down beneath the canopy. The night was thick and black, and I could barely see, but fear would have to wait. I had no time. I could hear the cannon firing again and again in the darkness. There had to be fighting going on nearby, although I couldn't see it. I hoped fervently that everyone was safe, if I could just make it in time. I felt someone nearby and slowed to a halt. All around me were men wearing the blue jackets of the Shinsengumi, grimacing in pain. It wasn't just a few of them. They'd gathered together in groups, spread out through this part of the forest, at the center. Saito-san stood, sword in hand, his chest heaving. What was going on? I'd never seen him so tired.
なるほど。目を見張る体力です。生身の体で我々鬼の動きについてくるとは。
Beyond Saito-san stood Amagiri, the demon. Oh. I stepped back and a twig snapped beneath my foot. Slowly, deliberately, Hamagiri's gaze turned towards me.
おや、君は。このようなところで何をしているのです。まさか、今日が戦場と化した今も、彼らと行動を共にしているのですか。
I chose to ignore Amagiri and turned instead towards Saito-san. Saito-san, there's trouble! The Satsuma are attacking the Fushimi magistrate's office!
何？
You have to call off the attack on the Ryuan temple and rush back to the magistrate office right away!
わかった。
He inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to Amagiri. His eyes blue slits.
では一刻も無駄にはできんな。
The moment the last word was out of his mouth, he leapt forward with tremendous speed, and His sword flickered through the air, heading straight for Amagiri. At first, I didn't believe what I was seeing. Amagiri had caught the incoming blade with his bare hands and flung it aside. Then, in the same moment, he made a chop. He made to chop his hand into Saito-san's unguarded side. He deflected Amagiri's blow with his left arm and struck again with his sword. He dodged to the side, avoiding the sword thrust, but Saito-san took the split-second opening to launch another attack, driving Amagiri back. His steel shimmered in the night, leaping through the air and snaking its way through Amagiri's defenses to strike at his vitals. The very tip of Saito's sword slid across Amagiri's cheek, and a thin line of blood trickled down his face.
君の実力はある程度理解しているつもりでしたが、それでも驚かされました。まさか人の身で私と戦える者がこの世に存在したとは。あなたは素晴らしい使い手です、斎藤。おそらく鬼ですらあなたと対等に戦える者は多くないでしょう。
褒め言葉など俺には無意味だ。俺は一介の武士に過ぎんからな。
He paused a moment to wipe sweat beading off of his forehead.
しかしその強さはあくまでも人のものに過ぎません。人の身の限界というものを思い知らせてあげましょう。
What I saw next, I could scarcely believe. On Amagiri's forehead, horns appeared, great white things, like what you might see in old books or paintings. His hair turned white like that of a fury, and his eyes began to glow with a strange, otherworldly light. When he spoke, his voice rumbled with a terrible power.
この姿を人前にさらしたのはこれが初めてです。君の強さに敬意を抱いているからこそ全力で戦わせていただきます。
As he leapt towards Saito-san like a bullet from a gun, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. He was far, far faster than he had been a moment before. Saito-san did his best to keep up with Amagiri's blows, but he seemed slower now. No, Saito-san wasn't slower. Amagiri was just too fast for him.
それが人の身の限界ですか。
He sounded almost disappointed. Saito-san cried out as Amagiri struck his left arm. Saito-san! I was about to run up to him.
近づくな。
奴らの狙いはあんただということを忘れたのか、雪村。ここであんたをこの男に連れ去られては、俺は務めを全うできぬことになる。
Oh.
殊勝な心がけです。上役から課せられた命は君にとってそれほどまでに大切なものなのですね。ならば手心を加えることこそ失礼に当たるというもの。
Amagiri kicked the ground.
乗れ。
Saito-san tried to swing with one more decisive blow as Amagiri charged towards him, but even so, Amagiri saw right through him. Then suddenly, before Saito-san could block, he threw an iron fist punch into him. He ground his teeth and swift dripped down his forehead. The pain he was feeling had to be incredible. Had Amagiri's blow broken his arm? But he ran towards Amagiri, his sword held high, and defiance burning in his eyes.
愚かなことを。
He batted Saito-san's attack aside one after another, as calmly as if he were waving away flies. Saito-san was in bad shape. He looked tired, and though he had managed to ignore the pain, his arm still clearly hurt him. If he didn't gain the upper hand and quickly, he'd lose to his own fatigue. Yeah, let's retreat for now. Saito-san, we have to retreat.
だった。
He frowned. Although he was a man of few words, Saito-san took things such as the missions and orders very seriously. To him, a retreat would be an incredible disgrace. But they're waiting for you to come back. I know you don't want to, but you have to retreat. If you keep fighting here, then what will happen to Inoue and Yamazaki? Those words seemed to hit the mark. Saito-san stopped and then slowly lowered his sword, his breathing heavy.
わかった。今俺が果たすべき務めはこの男を切ることではなく、皆を守ることか。
That's right.
すまなかった。
His voice was quiet. Who are you guys? Why are you always getting in the way of the Shinsengumi?
我々が鬼の一族だということは以前お伝えしたはずですが、鬼の起源についてはどこまでご存知ですか？
What?
人間たちがこの日の本に住み着くはるか以前から、我々鬼はこの日の本で暮らしていました。ですが人間がこの地で暮らすようになり、我々は次第に里を追われ、山中に隠れ住むこととなったのです。
Sen had told me something about this before. The demon clan asked time and time again for aid from the dominion of man, and time again men turned them down.
風間家の当主風間千景は今回の騒乱を利用し、各地に散り散りになった鬼の力を一つにまとめ、この日の本を再び鬼の手に取り戻そうとしているのです。
No!
あんたも風間とやらの意見に賛同している口か。
Amagiri shook his head.
鬼は影の存在で良いと思っています。歴史の表舞台になど出るべきではない。ただ平穏に暮らせれば良いのです。薩摩藩に手を貸してきたのは関ヶ原の戦いの時の縁を頼られてのこと。私は行動や風間の考えに賛同しているわけではないのです。
What? What does my father have to do with any of this? Don't tell me. Father is like Kazama. Did he really want to create a world of demons just like Kazama?
話はそれだけか。俺は時間稼ぎに乗るつもりなどない。これ以上の無駄話には付き合えんぞ。
His eyes had narrowed to angry slits. He smiled.
彼の力量に免じ、このまま見逃しましょう。
With a small shudder, Amagiri's horns disappeared, and his hair changed back to its normal human color.
一体どういうことだ。
私は風間たちの目的には賛同できないのですよ。そのようなことに利用されようとしている彼女には同情さえ感じます。
I wasn't sure what to think of Amagiri. It didn't seem like his intention was to be kind to us, and yet he was allowing Saito-san and his men and myself to leave. At the very least, it seemed, he had some sense of justice.
とりあえずこの男はこれ以上我々と戦うつもりはないようだ。雪村、負傷した大使の中で歩けぬほどの重傷を負った者はいたか？
No, I don't think so.
では皆と共に奉行所へ戻る。あんたは俺の後ろをついてこい。
We had just turned to leave when he spoke one last time.
風間は私よりもはるかに強い力を有しています。人の手で彼女を守りきるのは無理でしょう。今後は別行動を取ることを勧めます。
And with that, he disappeared into the night like silent mist. Saito stood stock still for several moments, where Amagiri had disappeared, his gaze fierce. Come on, Saito-san. We need to go. He didn't seem to hear me. Saito-san? Are you alright? Did you get hurt?
この俺が無種の相手に。
His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. After several more seconds of silence, he slowly raised his head.
何でもない。奉行所へ戻るぞ。時間がないと言っていただろう。
Right. What had Saito-san been thinking about? Was he really alright? Pensive silence was nothing new for him, but I'd felt something different from him this time. Frustration, perhaps?